and welcome to DrumWise Meets. Today, I'm with a drummer who's played for the likes of Ed Sheeran and Tom Jones, and he's also played on many movie soundtracks, including Rocket Man. Mark Pusey. Hi, Mark.
How's it going?
What equipment are you currently using, and do you have a collection of vintage drums by any chance for recording?
Yeah, so I've been with DW Drum Workshop drums for about 15 years or so. I've been I'm playing them before that because I went into pool percussion when I was a kid. I always had Premier stuff because my first drum kit was a Premier, a second-hand Premier, and I had a Ginister, an APK, then a Ginister, and I loved Premier. And then all of a sudden one day I walked into pool percussion and the guy in there was demoing a DW kit. And then that night I saw Breakfast at Tiffany's on Top of the Pops, and I was like, he's playing that kit I saw today, and I love this song. So I sort of fell in love with them a bit then. And then my hero, Carlos Vega, used to play Drum Workshop kit. And yeah, I think they're the best drums. They're great. And they've been really, really good to me. Incredibly supportive, really fantastic support. You know, you'll be in Timbuktu and be like, oh, my bracket's broken on the top. No problem. Send us the address of the hotel on the next venue. We'll get one there. And they're incredible support. Really, really great company. And the drums, I think, are the best sounding drums in the world. Outside of that, I've got what my friends call a bit of a snare drum problem, more than a snare drum collection. So I've got quite a few bits and pieces, some interesting things, some vintage stuff, some old Radio Kings, some old Ludwigs, a couple of 400s, late 70s Black Beauty, a late 80s Black Beauty, some copper, some Ludwig copper stuff, some Ludwig brass bits. Yeah, fair amount of vintage snares.
You didn't put a number on it, by the way.
I had 41 at the height of my issue, and they were all getting used. They were all getting circulated. Or there'd be a specific thing, like there'd be like a 10 by 6 DW snare that you never played that. But you know, it's cool for making loops with and taking to certain sessions. You wouldn't take it necessarily to a singer-songwriter recording. But there'd be certain sessions you'd be like, okay, well, if they might want to make a loop and then really crunch it and then have big drums in the chorus coming over it. So they'd all get used. They'd all get switched around. There's probably about 31 now. I went through a big phase getting rid of them. And I had a few, I had four Black Beauties. And at one stage, just because when I was a student, I got my student loan. It sounds ridiculous, but when I was a student, I got a student loan and was like, oh, I've always wanted a Black Beauty. I should just probably get one. So I did. I got one off of eBay. And it was in okay condition, but it sounded awful. And I didn't use it for like 6, 7, 8 years. And I just assumed that they were rubbish drums and I couldn't get why everybody was going on about them. It just turns out I had a dud. And then I bought another one from a secondhand drum store in the United States in Portland. And it looked a bit sort of past it, but it sounded incredible. So I used that one on everything for a long, long time. And then I was in Chicago and there was a one for $99 in a thrift store. They had no idea what they were selling. And that was another one that looked great, but sounded awful. So before I knew it, I had 3 drums. And then a friend of mine was thinning out his collection and was like, look, this one sounds great and looks great. So I use that all the time now. So I've effectively had 3 to get rid of that were just in lockups or, you know, that I just accrued over the years that either didn't look good or didn't sound good or both. And now this one is the one. So I've just pared it down, but about 31 snare drums now, and some vintage kits and alongside the main sort of DWs that sort of go out. I convinced myself, oh, because it's my job, I need them. You know, it's not so bad. If it was, I don't know, shoes or eyes or suits or something I was into, I'd probably be like, oh, it's a bit frivolous, but I convinced myself that, oh, they're for my job, that's fine.
Have you seen Graham Russell's collection? I mean,
Graham is the coolest guy, and he has a great that story is great. Graham Russell drums down in Portsmouth, Southampton, that sort of way. And every so often, I don't really do Facebook very much, but I do Instagram, and that posts things on Facebook. But every so often, I see some of the kits that he's got, and he's got a big 9000, right? The Yamaha 9000. That's just like
yeah.
He has a room with it set up in, and he's got one of everything they ever made in that colour. You know, from an 8-inch all the way down to an 18-inch tom and a bunch of snare drums. He's got a collection but mind you, he owns a drum store.
Well,
so
yeah, he can get away with it.
yeah, I feel like he can get away with it.
What age did you start drumming? And what artists or bands did you grow up listening to?
So I started, I'd like to say it was a really noble story of I always loved drums, etc. I had a piano teacher when I was 8 years old. She lived above a petrol station, and I hated her, because instead of going to the lesson and coming away being able to play I just wanted to play Beatles tunes, come away playing Hey Jude or whatever, I'd be like, which I suppose is helpful, but to an 8-year-old, it was the most boring thing in the world. And after a year or so of these lessons where I was just falling asleep in the middle of the lesson, she came downstairs and said to my parents, I don't think music's for your son. So, I didn't really get on with her. And so I fell out of love with it for ages. And then when I was 11, we went on a holiday. No, I was 12. We went on a holiday, and there was a house band where all the reps came together and played of an evening. And the coolest club rep, who all the girls fancied, he did all the best activities. It was all the boys, really enjoyed his. He used to do comedy and all that sort of stuff. It was really cool. He played drums in the house band, and he had a cherry red Yamaha 9000. And he one night he said, "Oh, we've got one of our kids plays drums out here. Do you want to come up and play some drums?" So this kid got up. He was younger than me. I must have been 12, and he was 10. And he got up and he played My Girl, and he was great. And the audience lost their minds. It was great. And I was like, "Mum, I want to do that. That's really cool." And so he came back, and they bought me a snare drum, and I got some lessons. And the teacher I had was called Jim Ferris, and he was great. And it was a combination of, okay, this is how you hold the sticks versus this is how you play a song. I think I think for younger people, if you go in like, oh no, you need to hold the sticks and sit up straight and do all this, it can get really boring really quick. But if they just want to come in playing a Foo Fighters song, and you spend the first 6 months going, no, left, right, left, all that stuff's super important. But I think it needs to be balanced with something. And that's where my drum teacher got it right, and the piano teacher did.
Absolutely.
So, yeah, I must have been about 12, I guess, when I started playing. I got my first drum.
Do you have an all-time favourite drummer?
Yes, I do. My hero is a guy called Carlos Vega, and not many people talk about Carlos. And there's a few people. My buddy James Hester likes him. My mate Lee Mullen likes him. Ralph Salmons, Neil Wilkinson. These are 4 guys that I talk to about Carlos. And he was incredible. He played for James Taylor for years and years and years. And he played with Vince Gill, Aaron Neville, Linda Ronstadt, Bette Midler. He played drums on the Grease soundtrack. There was so much stuff that Carlos did. And he was incredible. Him and Jeff were really good friends. And they used to throw one another, Jeff Porcaro, and they used to throw one another work. And Carlos was one of Jeff's favorite drummers, but they're very much in the same vein. Although Jeff would famously never want to do solos and would say that he didn't have chops. Carlos was burning. He had all of that stuff. He used to play in his, he went to Eagle Rock High School along with the guys from Toto. Those guys sort of grew up in the same part of LA. And somebody the other day hipped me to these recordings of the Eagle Rock High School jazz band. And I mean, it sounds like nothing it sounds like they all could have been, all of these kids, the sax players, the trumpets, everything. They were burning. And they were like 14, 15, 16 years old. But look it up on YouTube, the Eagle Rock High School Jazz Band from like the 70s, like 74, with Carlos Vega. And it's like a 15-year-old kid, like ding, 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 you know, like burning. And so he had the groove stuff, which he's incredible at. I mean, he played on Wind Beneath My Wings. And you ever know that you're my hero, and these huge ballads. He became known as a balladeer. He played on I don't know much, but I know I love you. That song by Linda Ronstadt and Aaron Neville. Like, but he was incredible. His groove, his centered sense of time, and you know, it was like nobody else. Him and Jeff were my two sort of guys that I grew up listening to.
I love those answers where it's like, oh, and then the kids can like look someone up, and yeah, it's brilliant. Yeah. Brilliant, really good.
That's how it's done nowadays, right?
Yeah.
I mean,
oh yeah, they don't know how lucky they are with YouTube and not having to have dial-up. Dee-dong, dee-dong.
So I was in a really weird generation. Me and my immediate peers, sort of, I guess, people now between 30 and 40, I guess. Yeah, exactly that age bracket, people between 30 and 40. When the generation before us started, Steve White, my friend, and he really helped me out a lot. Steve White, ex-Paul Weller, you know, does sort of Family Silver. He's great killer drummer and a great educator as well. A fantastic flag flyer for education in this country, musical education. It's great. His generation, and he used to talk in clinics and in lessons about how they'd put pennies on records, like big old records, like the Buddy Rich stuff, and Weckl talks about this too. They'd put pennies on the records, like the vinyl records, to slow them down so they could work out what was happening. Nowadays, I have an app on my phone called the Amazing Slow Downer. So if you don't understand something or you can work something out, you can just slow it down. And the digital age, you can do that in. And the vinyl age, you could do that in. But when I was a kid, we had tapes, like cassette tapes. We didn't have vinyl. We were too old for that. And we weren't young enough to be part of the digital revolution. So we had cassette tapes. And you can't slow cassette tapes down. And you can't, you know, videotapes, you can't slow that stuff down. There was no internet, nothing like that. So what we used to have to do is buy educational videos, drum educational videos, like Dave Weckle's Back to Basics, because otherwise you'd see these people do these licks and be like, I have no idea what they're doing. It's too fast, you know. And teachers, a lot of the teachers were like, I don't know, you know. So nowadays, you absolutely have no excuse. You've got the world at your finger. There's a great app, the Amazing Slow Downer, I think it's called. There are, you can go on YouTube and look up tutorials for specific things. Just type in, find your favorite drummer and look up tutorial. Just type in tutorial next to it, something will come up. We didn't have that, which was a real shame. So we sort of did it the hard way, but yeah, you don't know how lucky you are nowadays to have all that stuff.
What's the highlight of your career so far?
There have been loads. I've been really, really lucky to have some great, great things, be involved with some great things with some great people and artists. Stuff with Ed Sheeran has been incredible, because he's become a really good mate and he's a really good human. He's a good guy and I love his music. He's a really good egg. And, you know, just been sat watching him write songs and like, how are you just pulling this out of thin air? You know, like, it's incredible. So that's great. Recently, I did a soundtrack for the movie Rocket Man, the Elton John movie. I played most all the drums on that, apart from a couple songs where I was away on a thing, and there was some guys already in the studio doing other projects. And Giles, the producer, was like, oh, can you come do this? You know, so it was, but apart from that, on 80-90% of the movie, I play the drums on it. And it's incredible. It was really great because people I've admired my whole life, who I would sneak into jazz clubs to watch when I was 14 years old and stuff, would ring me up going, are you on that? It's great. It sounds just like Nigel Olsson, or it sounds just like, you know, that bit with the D Murray bass line, and you go, it's great. And so that was personally a really big, you know, we won the songs that I was a part of won Golden Globes and an Oscar, and Grammys, and you know, it was and the people I met and played with during that, who I've worked with a lot subsequently, you know, because it was a really good team that they put together on that. I've you know, have been recommended for other stuff through those guys, and it was just a moment that was really, really nice. And you know, I'd get texts most days from mates, you know, who'd watched the film, who'd taken a picture of the titles, because it's rare that, I mean, I've done lots of sort of bits and pieces before and film stuff where you have no idea who's on the movie because they're not in the credits, and they put us in the credits because they thankfully really valued our contribution. And most days I would get a text from a mate who'd taken a picture of our name, going, oh my God, I know someone famous, you know, you played on this movie, it was great. And it was great, not for the adulation or whatever, but just personally. It was so much fun doing with some people I really, really admired and got a chance to work with, so, including Elton John. We were on Elton John's new song, so yeah.
Actually, while we're talking about that, I was going to ask you about a bit later. So, with regards to Rocket Man, how did you approach the recording of that? Because obviously there were original recordings that you had to try and replicate, Nigel Olsson's stuff. So, how did you approach sort of re-recording those songs?
So that's a great question, and it's so if you've seen the movie, it basically is all the way from Elton being born all the way to pretty much now, and they wanted the music to reflect that. So instead of just being a jukebox musical or a jukebox film where you just play the tunes and you'd go, oh, it looks like you know, thankfully I'm still standing. I'm still standing. They wanted to do it so it became part of his life as he evolved as an artist. And in that respect, what they do is we'd listen to very early demos of songs, and like there's a song called Amarina which we play. That's I think it's in the background. It's on the soundtrack, but it's in the background where he's driving down a big hill in Hollywood, I think, if I vaguely remember. I haven't seen the movie since it came out. But with that one in particular, we listened to loads of really, really, really early demos, and demos where you could hear people talking, chorus, you know, over it, and then listen to the final product. And they wanted us to sort of blur the lines between the two gradually throughout the film, to show the evolution of the music, I suppose, and how it came together. So rather than, and sometimes in your song, for example, your song is such a staple of Elton John's catalogue, that I meticulously wrote down every ghost note and did everything, and, you know, wrote it out. In fact, I've got the chart over there. And I went to laborious lengths. I mean, I know the tune anyway, but from the 6-stroke rolls of and all that sort of stuff. If you actually listen to the drum part in that, there's so much going on. And in any other song, you'd be like, oh, it's a bit busy, mate. But it's so subtle and it's so beautiful, and it weaves into the, you know, the drums are doing this, and it's a beautiful bed for the rest of the song to lay on. So things like getting that minutia, that to me is how the song works. That the art lies in the detail there. So it was really important that we took those specific details and distilled them and did that. But with some of the rest of it was like, no, we don't. There's a big song and dance number in Saturday Night's All Right for Fighting, in the movie. And, you know, people getting thrown through windows in barroom brawls, and they go around the corner to a fairground, and it's a big, like, Hollywood epic from yesteryear kind of staging setup. And in things like that, you were really encouraged to sort of be like, oh, no, but we need it to build here. Oh, there's no fill at the end of that bar. And they're like, yeah, but over the course of this 4 bars, you know, he's about to come out of the window, so we need it to build. So there was a lot of stuff that was being changed. And those sessions started, I guess, I was involved with it from March, May, maybe 2018. And the movie came out March, April 2019. And during that time, we were back and forth to the studio like 15, 16 separate sessions, sometimes two sessions, and it's 6 hours worth of recording at the time, because it was constantly changing. Paramount or somebody would say, oh, we're going to change this scene, and rather than just edit the music, they'd re-record it, or they'd watch it, and in the context of things, well, this seems a little too early, Elton, can we modernize it, or whatever else. So it was incredibly interesting, and to be part of something that was where you're in on the ground floor of making. I mean, the film is about music, is about a musician and music. So to be in on the ground floor, in some way making or being a part of creative calls on how that's going to come across was great. It's really good fun.
Were they filming at the same time that you were doing the music, or is the music done first?
No, so a lot of the time the music's done completely separately. But for example, in March, I think it was March. I've got a terrible memory. I'll have to look in my date book to get the exact dates. But like around March, my first involvement, there were big dance rehearsals for the ensemble pieces, and my friend who's a choreographer, my friend Jenny White is one of my best mates, recommended me to the choreographer, like, oh, you should get a drummer in to audition dancers for this, because it's all about the beats in this particular scene. And I got a call to do that. And then separately with Giles Martin, the producer, who called me in to do the sessions on the movie. But it came together nicely because at one stage they were working out these big set pieces for the movie. And Adam Murray, was a bit of a creative genius, would be writing the dance or choreographing the dance along to me and a pianist basically playing the tune. But it would get to the stage where some of the stuff got cut, but in the extra scenes on the DVD, you can see that there's a bit where they're spiraling around what looks like a massive cake. And there were dance moves in that scene where they'd be walking along, and it would be 1, 2, 3, 4, or as they say in dance, like 5, 6, 7, 8, 5, 6, 7, and they'd be doing all this dancing, and then they'd need to flip, they'd need to turn around, but the turning around would take a beat. So we'd have to find a way to shoehorn an extra beat in. So it'd be 5, 6, 7, 8, turn, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So somehow we'd have to find a way to put, I don't know, Honky Cat or Sacrifice or an Elton John song, how to do it in 9/8. And that was incredibly interesting, because trying to shoehorn something like that in, whilst being faithful to the original music, whilst being inventive, whilst giving the dancers and the action on screen what it needed, was really, really interesting. Yeah, and that was, I guess, like March 2018 when that started.
When you said that you wrote out your own chart,
yeah,
did you get to hear the original drum stems
very occasionally? Yeah, very occasionally when there would be a particular fill or something, Giles had the masters, and he'd be like, "We want to do this particular fill, but it needs to end on this beat." So he'd play the original fill, and I'd be like, "That's not Giles." Yeah, or whoever it was.
Yeah.
But yeah, so we do the choreography, and then they'd film a bit, and then we'd come in and play the session and do the music, and then somebody would edit it in LA and realize that it was too long. So you'd come in and something would slightly change, and then you'd come in for another session because they'd filmed another chunk and they wanted the music to it, and this would go on and on and on. So it wasn't filmed then the audio recorded. It was very much intertwined in every way.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
No, that's really interesting. I think a lot of people won't realise kind of how it works. So
yeah, well, I've done like I say, I've done movies before, and you know, you turn up and there's 60 an orchestra, there's 60 odd people in the room, and you come in and you read the chart, and it's ba-dum, bam, ba-dum, bam, ba-dum, dun, 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 dun. I don't know why I just sang the Mario tune. But everybody's playing the same thing, and then you do a session on it. You might do 2 sessions on it, and then you go home, and then you see the trailer, and it's like, oh, that's that. Oh, that's cool. You know, and that's it. That's your some involvement with the movie. But I think this is why it was so special for me, is because there was so much involvement and really close relationships and really good friends that come out of it.
Yeah, that's great. And actually, what you just talked about there with charts very much leads me on to my next question. So when you first get a gig, we say gig, whatever it may be, when you first get a gig, a job, how do you learn the songs? So are you given the sheet music? I know a lot of obviously live drummers that I've spoken to very much don't get given the chart, but when it comes to like studio recording stuff, I guess that there's a difference there.
Yeah, so I mean, every single scenario is different. For like the pop artists and the touring stuff that I do, I don't think I've ever been handed a chart. Unless it's last minute. There's the occasional one. I did a couple of tours with John Barrowman, and because it's fairly musical theatre and he's in that grounding, and the music director, Matt Brind, is a wonderful orchestrator. He had charts for everything, or at least lead charts. So you knew how many bars there were, etc. But for the most part, you do a pop gig, for want of a better expression, or that type of music, you won't get given charts. You'll get given, oh, we're looking to play this stuff, also stuff from the new album. Here's the new album. They'll put it on a Dropbox, or they'll send you a list of songs that they'll want to do. Or, you know, if it's an established artist, it will be a back catalogue. Like, we've been doing these ones for the last tours, and we'll probably do those this time, or this time. And that's just a case of becoming familiar with it. So in that sort of terms, like I'll put the CD on, or I'll put all of the tracks that they want to do into a Spotify playlist or whatever on Apple Music, stick it on, and just have it around the house, and then I'll have it in the car. And before I sit down and go, this is bar 1, this is bar 2, I just want to become familiar with it so that it's in here and it's ingrained a little bit. And then by the time I come to sit at the drums with it, I've got an idea of how the song goes. I've got an idea of the amount of swing, or the amount of aggression, or the drums role in that song. Am I just a supporting player? Is it a little tickle job where I'm just playing really lightly and gently and supporting the role? Or is it a big, intense, show-stopping thing? And then by the time I come to sit at the drums, I'll have an idea of that. And then maybe I'll write out a chart, which might be, depending on how complicated the song is, with every hit and push and everything and every bar, or it might be verse, chorus, ramp up, verse, chorus, etc. My benchmark has always been to go in playing exactly what they've given me. So if you're playing, I don't know, can't think of the tune. It's Not Unusual by Tom Jones. You go in and I'll play the drums exactly like it is on the track. Then, if they want to go, oh, okay, well, yeah, that's 60 years old now. Okay, cool. What do you want? What do you need? Do you need flavor, or do you need some more toms, or do you need to be a bit flashier, or what do you need? And then you have that discussion. But if you go in thinking, oh yeah, man, I'm gonna put my own thing on it, and you play what's not on, what they haven't given you, I get the impression that somebody would just be like, what are you doing? That's not how the song goes. So my benchmark is always to start with the most faithful recreation of what I've been given to learn, and then go from there based on direction. In some orchestral stuff, we just did, with Miles Brett, redid the Friends theme tune for their 20th anniversary, 25th anniversary. And that was with an orchestra, and you go in and there's the chart, because you know what, there's 90 other people playing exactly the same thing, and if you're off on your own, well, it's not gonna match. So here's the sheet music, and stick to it like poop to a blanket. You know, it's got to be that, and that's what it's going to be. So it really varies depending on what you're doing. But for the most part, with the pop stuff, with the stuff that there are no charts for, I just listen to the music, get it into my system, and then maybe do some further charts, and then just play it through. But with more orchestral stuff or film stuff, certainly, it tends to be all red, mostly red.
Cool. Just a question I've just thought of, actually. You'd be a very good person to comment on this. So a lot of our students, we do it differently with everybody, of course. Everyone's different, but we have a lot of charts, sheet music stuff that we've written out for songs. So, for example, I've written Saturday Nights All Right for Fighting. You know, gone through and written all of that out. I won't show you it because it's probably wrong. But
Probably right.
But when we write stuff like that out and then we put it on the screen and then they're sat here trying to work it out, they get very much hung up on, oh, well, I'm not playing that exact fill.
Yeah.
How do you feel about that? Because I suppose it depends on the player, but I very much say to a lot of them, don't get hung up on the fill being exactly the same. If you're going for an audition with the band, okay, we need to talk differently. But when you're just learning a song, as long as you're playing it in the right way, with the right feel and vibe.
Wait there. I'll see if I've got the chart to that exact song. There you go. First one in the whole book. So, here we go. So this was Saturday Nights All Right for Fighting. All calmly, because they were like, okay, this week we're going to tackle Saturday Nights All Right for Fighting. They've got the choreography done, they've got the filming done. We're going to do the music to the demo that we programmed for them to rehearse it to. So that's the song perfectly as it came out. This is what it ended up being. Mm-hmm. So this in the studio, so much stuff changed, you know, verse 1, 8, 8, louder into the 2 bars with a crash on the beginning of the bar. So this is what I end up sort of reading. It's kind of like a cheat sheet. I don't know if you can see, but then something will change and they'll go, oh, we don't want to do that. So you'll scribble it out and then you'll add new stuff in. So as far as it being laboriously transcribed out, if it's a figure in an orchestra, if you're playing a Harry Potter movie and he's running down the stairways and there's a chase scene and the violins are going diddle-dim, diddle-dim, da-dum, da-dum, ba-ba-da-ba-ba-da-bum, and the trombones are going, you better be playing da-dum, da-dum, da-ba-da-ba-ba-da-bum. Because if you're not, it's going to sound like a train wreck. In pop music, I've found, in my experience, that you've got a little more room to maneuver. So if there's a fill you see written out, and it goes ba 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 doom do 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 do, and you go ba 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 doom da da ba boom ba ba bish. As long as you kind of got the entry right, people are fairly forgiving of the result, provided it's along the same lines. If there's a fill that goes ba ba doom 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 doom, and you play, it's not in the spirit of the song. So a lot of the time, and again, what I do, like I say, when I go into a session, I'll prepare laboriously and I'll chart out exactly note for note, exactly what it's supposed to be. And if somebody's sent me programming that they want me to replicate, so, oh, here's a demo of the song we're going to cut on Monday, you know, just to have a listen to it, learn it, and then we'll play it on Monday. I'll write out exactly what they've done on the demo. And then it's a good starting place, because at least we know. They might say, oh, forget that, whatever. And I'll come in and I'll play the fill that they've programmed, much like your students would play the bar that's written in the thing. And it'll go, ba doom da doom 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 da doom da. And you'll play it, and then a voice will go, yeah, cool, Mark, great. Yeah, you know that fill, I don't know how to play the drums. I just programmed that. Can you do something better? And you'll be like, sure. And then so you'll cut it again, and then you'll do a different fill that you think suits that style of music. And it really depends. Sometimes some people will go, oh, you didn't get that fill quite right. I wrote it out because I really like that fill. And I've had that. I had a session with a guy called Daniel Goody for a girl called Lauren Aquilina. And he'd written this fill out that I thought was a bit alien, and it was really weird. And I was like, he can't mean that. It just sounds like it's been programmed incorrectly. And naively, I thought, well, I'll just play something that's suitable, that's kind of like it, but sounds a bit more in time. And so I did, and we got to the session and I played it like that. And he said, "Oh, you didn't quite get that fill right. You know, I wouldn't mind having the fill as it was on the demo, as it was written out, as you've written out." I was like, "Oh, sure, no problem. I'll play it." And I played it, and it sounded really weird. But I bit my tongue, and then came back into the control room to listen to it after the take, and said, "Is there a bigger plan for when that fill's happening?" And he's like, "Oh yeah, I've written the string arrangement to it, and it's this bit in the song where there's a lot of drama and tension, and it's the emotional denouement, and everything falls apart. So it's supposed to sound a little bit tense." And of course, because you're in early with the bass player and or with the programming, and you're in at the ground floor, you can't see the bigger picture. You've got no idea what it is. But he's written that fill out in that way for a very particular purpose. Other times, fills are written out and, you know, I'll do something in that vein. That looks like a fast fill, lots of 16th notes. So I want something flashy and flaring. Others might be really simple, so they want something really simple. It's communication, I think. If you start working with a band and you play that and you don't quite get the fill as read, they might turn around and go, "Oh, can we work on that fill?" Cool, that's on you. You should get that fill right. That's your job. And sometimes they might be like, "Oh, I prefer that." And that can be a dialogue if you can't quite get that fill and you're learning to be like, "Oh, I haven't quite got to grips with this yet. You know, do you guys want it exactly like this, or can I feel out a different way to play it?" And it might be a bit more constructive, a bit more helpful to talk about it.
That's great. Thanks for talking about that. That's awesome.
But the thing, nobody tells you this stuff until you learn the hard way. Until you go in and you're like, "That's rubbish. I'm not playing that fill." Whoa. Hello, Mark. Sorry, that's not how that bit goes. You know, but if you talked about it and you just, you know, you're relaxed about it and honest and open about it, then you'll have a much better time.
Just to talk about recording for a minute. So when you first have your kit at the studio and when you've set up in the studio, what do you do about tuning your drums to the environment that they're in? So is that something that you, one of the first things you do when you, because obviously, you know, we've all had it where we'll tune up our kit and we'll be like, "Oh, it sounds amazing." And then you take it to this venue or this recording studio and you play it and you go, "What? What was I thinking?" So how do you approach that?
So I can only speak personally, but you tune it for the music that you're playing in the environment that you'll be playing it in. So if you're playing in a pub that's really, it's got loads of you know, fabric seats around the drums because you've been shoved in a corner, that's where the band goes tonight. You know, you might want your drums to ring loads, and you might want them to, so they project because you're not amplified. And then the very next scenario, you might be in a studio where there's, where, you know, there are mics this far away from each drum, and there's a mic on the top head and a mic on the bottom head. And you have to tune them entirely differently and maybe apply some damping just to make sure that it's faithful to the sound that they're going for. It's literally a case of using your ears. So tuning drums should be something that everybody should do. It should be part of the national curriculum of drumming, if you like. It's really important because it's your job. Your job isn't how flash you are or this or that or that. Your job is how you sound. And if you can play all the stuff, but it just sounds bad, well, what's the point of playing all the stuff? Because nobody wants to listen to it if it sounds bad. So part of your job as a drummer is the final product, which is how it sounds. So part of your job as a drummer is achieving that sound. So to every new gigging drummer, or to every new starting out drummer, you can buy I endorse Remo drum heads. I think they're the best, and they just so happen to do something called a Pro Pack, which you get a set of heads and a free snare head. So you can get a Diplomat Pro Pack. So you get a full set of Diplomat weight heads, very thin heads, clear, for £50. So. And then you can get Emperor Pro Packs, which are double ply heads, and you can get coated ones for £50, and a whole set of heads for £50. And then you can get maybe, I don't know, pinstripes or whatever else, ebony heads. And for a gig that cost you 200, you got paid £200 for, you could probably buy 3 sets of heads. And that's one gig. You take them home and you experiment. And you're like, ooh, this Diplomat, when I tune it this way, it sounds really boing, 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 boingy. There's loads of overtones. It's very clear, but it doesn't ring for very long. And the Emperor sounds a bit wetter, a bit darker. And because it's coated, the decay is smoother. And there's a bit more stick attack because there's a substance on the top of the head that you're striking. And already, just by buying those heads and mucking around with them for an hour, the next time you're on a session or the next time you're on a job and somebody's like, I need like a really ringy open sound. Yep, I know how to get that. Because you did your homework. You bought those heads, you experimented with them. I need kind of like a woolly sound because it's a singer-songwriter. I don't want the toms to be in the way, but it doesn't mean I don't want attack. That sounds like a coated Emperor job or maybe even a coated pinstripe job. By the way, they're exactly the same heads except pinstripes are bonded at the collar, just around the collar. Just knowing those things. Oh, an ebony head, that sounds darker. Looks and sounds darker. It doesn't have the same quality of overtone. It doesn't ring out the same way that Diplomat does. So knowing that, when somebody says, oh, can you come in and do an album session? It's for a singer-songwriter. Okay, cool. What's the vibe? Is it singer-songwriter like Janis Joplin? Or is it singer-songwriter like James Morrison? Or is it singer-songwriter like James Taylor, like quiet and brushy? You know, Bob Dylan. And they'll say one of the above, and then you'll be able to pick your instruments and the head selection that you take with you on what base it on what they've asked, or on what they've told you. And then when you get there, again, if you're in a place that's surrounded by a load of cushions, or you're in a big room in the middle on your own with the mics on you and room mics out, you need to listen to your drums as you're tuning them to make sure that you're getting the right sounds out of them for the music. So, like you said, you know, you'll tune your drums up and they sound great in your bedroom or your drum studio or your living room or wherever, and then you take them to the studio and you're like, well, this doesn't sound right. Then just tweak them. Just tweak them. This place has no ringing. So if I tune them a little tighter, there'll be a little bit of ringing. Or if I slacken them off a bit, there'll be a little less. Or I can put some moon gel on them. Or I can dampen them or use a heavier head or a lighter head. But if you've done your homework and you know about head selection, you know about tuning, then it doesn't really matter what you're called on or what you're called for. You'll be in a position where you can hit the ground running when you get there.
People bring a drum to the studio. I like the sound of this, but I don't think it's in tune. And I'm like, well, if you like the sound of it, it's in tune. Like, it's a personal preference. Of course, if you brought it in and it's going, doof, and I'm like, what band is it? Oh, it's for a Tower of Power tribute. Yeah, maybe not. But so obviously, again, tuning for the music. But yeah. Do you agree that there's kind of not a right and a wrong way? It's very much personal preference and tuning for what you're playing for.
Absolutely right. Yeah, absolutely right. It's for the music you're playing for, and it's personal preference. You know, there was a thing maybe 3 or 4 years ago where everybody was trying to get the deepest, fattest, wettest snare drum sound they could. Oh man, that's fat. He's going in. That's fat. And I was like, just sounds flabby to me. Like ghost notes aren't there in it, and you know, it's got doof, but it's taken up so much of the musical spectrum. If this is the low part and this is the high part, you know, and piano and vocals and overheads are up here, and the bass guitar and bass drum and all that's just down here, and you know, everything else, guitar, most of the piano, it's all in the vocals are kind of in the middle here. You know, this snare drum is taking up all of this range. Instead of this little bit or this little bit, it's taken up so much of that spectrum. I didn't like it. It became really fashionable for a while. And I did it because people would ask for it. Yeah, I want a really big fat snare. Cool, I know how to get it. I'll get it for you, no problem. But similarly, it wasn't really my taste. But to some people, that would have sounded great. Yeah. And it was really hip, so it was really fashionable at the time. And to some people, it sounded like, well, there's no definition, there's no presence, there's no crack. So it is personal preference. If somebody said this drum isn't in tune because it's going, well, it just doesn't sound right for them or their application. So, And a lot of it is interpretation as well. When you're doing things to order, our job, a freelance music or session musician or whatever you want to call it, it is partly about interpretation and communication, really, and trying to find out what people want. So if you go in for a singer-songwriter session and they say, yeah, I want this to be, because they might not be musicians. They certainly probably aren't drummers, but they'll say things that you necessarily won't know, like, I want this section to be yellow or bright. Well, what drum is yellow or bright? You know, like, but maybe they mean they don't want anything muddy, or they don't want anything boomy or big. They want light, sparkly sounds. So maybe high-pitched cymbals played with metal brushes, maybe, or nothing that's too rumbly or too low-endy. So it's about interpreting what people are asking for and what people are saying, and based on your own taste as well. If you turn up to a session, you don't know what the hell's going on. You tune the snare drum to medium, I guess. You don't tune it like a Stuart Copeland reggae snare drum, or like a great big fat Jim Keltner backbeat, because what if you're wrong? If you start in the middle, you've got somewhere to go, I guess. Do you know this snare drum? This is my favourite snare drum. I love this. If this is a bit too bright for you, or it's a bit too cangy, or it's not what you're looking for, just tell me, and I can either fix it or I can use a different one.
Just tell me. I've got 31 others. It's fine.
And I've got 30 others. You know, pick one. What are you after?
Which black beauty do you like? This one, this one, this one, or this one?
Yeah. Oh, two of them are gone now. So yeah.
I'm very much of the school that you do what works for what you're playing. So I generally am a beta barrier when I'm playing rock. You know, I will play like this. But I've done recordings before where if it's a slow song and, you know, I've got my bass drum tuned up a little bit, of course, this does not work. So it's a case of obviously letting the drum breathe. So what I'm getting at is kind of when you're recording, do you have to slightly change your technique sometimes depending on what you're recording?
Well, you've said it. Yeah, it's based on what you're recording. So sometimes in terms of technique, I use I don't see many other people use it, but like Murray, there was a guy called Murray Spivak. And again, my hero, Carlos Vega, used to get lessons from Murray Spivak and a guy called Richard Wilson in LA. And so I was really always interested in his grip, because it looked like he was throwing water off or throwing darts, or throwing water droplets off the end of his fingers. This is alongside the Moella thing, you know, the movement of the wrist like this, and the economy of motion, and being able to get several strokes out of one movement, a down, tap, and an up. But moreover, where I'll get a stick, hang on one sec. It's really, it's like a really light way of holding sticks, and it's the technique I use the most. So it's here. It's with the fat of the thumb pinched here, and in the first knuckle of the middle finger, and that's kind of basically my technique. And it looks like I'm about to drop the stick, but that's about as tight as I ever hold it. And so I'm playing like this. But sometimes, you know, Saturday Night's All Right for Fighting, there's a tune where I can play like that, and I can play it as loudly or as aggressively as anybody else can play it with that technique, because it's the technique I use. But it doesn't feel right. It needs to be, you know, gripping the sticks and baseball batting it, you know, because that's the attitude of the song, that's the heart of the song. So a lot of the time, technique doesn't go out the window, because hopefully you've refined your technique enough and you've spent enough hours on it that it's just a natural habit, you know. Same as when you're going to make a cup of tea. You don't think, okay, so I've got to pop my hand on the kettle like this, and I've got to grip it by spreading my fingers and then pulling them over and then lifting the kettle over to the sink to fill it up. You don't think that, because you've used your hands enough that over the years, you know how to pick something up and throw it down. Exactly the same is true with drums. If you do it enough, it becomes part of you. So if you practice in that way enough and you play enough gigs in that way, it just becomes part of your process. It just becomes part of how you play the instrument. However, that's constantly adapting. Like you say, there are certain technical things that you do. Like I play mostly when I'm recording, heel down, whether I'm burying the beat or not. And I certainly have a different attitude to playing in the studio than I do live. A lot of the time, you listen to great drum recordings that are close mic'd, and they're not beaten as hard as you'd think they are. There are exceptions, you know, like great drum sound, Give It Away by Red Hot Chili Peppers. That's Chad Smith playing drums. That's mostly room mics because it sounds so big. If you were to put the close mics on, it wouldn't sound the same. So that's how technology's adapted to make that sound so big, is because that's mostly a room mic sound. That's why it sounds so huge, compressed room sound. But in terms of recording in a studio versus playing live, I immediately lay off the cymbals when I'm recording, because so much of that high end gets taken up and bled out of all the other mics when you're hitting a cymbal and you're cracking. And you see people live. A lot of the live drummers that you see who are hugely, you know, very choppy and incredible players live don't record. And they don't record because their sound, as it happens, what they're doing is incredible. And, you know, in terms of energy and live performance, you see it, and the singer's listening to it going, man, this is great. And it gives them energy, it gives everybody energy. That's exactly what's required in that arena. You play a ballad and you're hitting the drums as loud as that, and it just sounds terrible, because it's basic physics. If you've got a membrane which is going like that, and you overwork that membrane, well, then the wave corrupts. So instead of, imagine dropping a pebble in the water, in a bucket of water, and you see it hits in the middle and the waves go woo. They go like that, don't they? And then they disparate and they get slowly less, and then there's no waves. If you chuck a stone or a rock really hard into that water, loads of water comes out, and the wave doesn't go woo, it goes everywhere, and then eventually it calms down. Exactly the same is true in audiology terms, in terms of you've got a capsule or a diaphragm in the microphone, and you want that to vibrate in tandem to make a nice sound. And when that's too hard, the SPL, the sound pressure levels that microphone it is dealing with, it is too much for it, then it doesn't record well, and nor does the membrane itself, the drum, the head, which vibrates in the same way. Another great thing on YouTube is Mike Mangini hit cymbal in slow motion.
Yeah. Have
you seen that?
Yeah, it's amazing.
So there you go. That's he's hitting a cymbal, and you see the cymbal bend and wobble like that. If you hit that cymbal too hard, well, that wobble gets corrupted. So the cymbal doesn't sound like a good cymbal anymore. It sounds like a mess. And the same's true with drums. So I generally play a lot quieter in the studio than I do live, unless the music calls for it. Unless the music calls for the aggression and needs a certain sound. And then you change it, and then everything's out the window. Everything anyone says goes out the window the second something different needs to be done. But for the most part, generally, I tend to play a little quieter in the studio and a little more measured, knowing that this, as it stands, is going to be held in perpetuity. This is going to be forever. What I play now is going to be heard, or is going to be available to be heard forever, versus, you know, smacking the crap out of stuff live because people want to see you go like this. Yay! You know, it doesn't work so well in the studio. So it has to be a bit more measured.
So when you record with an artist, can you explain how it works in terms of how you get paid? So what I mean by that is, do you get paid like for a specific session, or is there like a performance fee after you've recorded? And also, how does live work compare to studio work?
At school, they should teach tax returns. They should teach how to manage money in tax returns, and nobody ever does. And you don't get into the glamour of playing the drums or whatever because you think about invoicing people at the end of it. You do it because it's fun. So it's a really interesting conversation to have. And it, again, is as varied as technique and as music and as every other faculty and every other part of, every other facet rather of music. Sometimes you're working for an artist, you'll get employed by the artist, and the artist will go, I like you, you're the best person for me, how much do you need? Or I can afford to pay you this, or whatever. And then again, you have the discussion. Another time it might be the record company that go, we pay our musicians this. This is a starting artist, or it's an established artist, or this is a heritage artist who's been around forever. We're paying this. And sometimes they might say, we're going to pay you less on a travel day because you're not actually performing, and we're going to pay you more on a gig day, or we're going to pay you less for rehearsal. I've never understood that, and more for a gig. But the rehearsal, I'm working 12 hours a day, constantly refining, and I'm playing all day, and it's stewing my brain. You want to pay me less for that? That doesn't make any sense to me. So it's varied. Sometimes you'll get paid up front, not often. And then sometimes you'll have to invoice them after the fact. Sometimes if you do a gig, like a gig in a pub, or a gig for a club, or with certain bands, you get paid on the night out of the purse that the artist gets. It really, really, really varies. But a few things on money. It's important when you're starting out. I recommend just playing. Just play. Doesn't matter how much money it is. This is what I did anyway. I just wanted to play. I didn't care if it was no money, if there was no whatever. I just kind of wanted to play, and that's and that's helpful because it means more people hear you play, and then sooner or later more people like how you play, and they'll go, "Oh, I heard this guy the other night with that guy. You should use it. It's great." But then as you get older, and you start having mortgage payments, and you start having bills and kids, and buying cars and stuff like that, that doesn't really butter too many parsnips, so to speak. So like when I choose gigs, it's either because I love the people, the opportunity in terms of the artist, or in terms of this gig gets to travel or whatever, is great, or the money. And it has to be, for me now, two of those things. If it's great people and we're going to great places and great money, but I don't like the music or whatever else, then it's a no. Then it's an okay, rather. But if the music's bad, the people are bad, but it's great money, it's not worth putting your time up for. But when you're younger and you're in a position where you just want to get experience, you just want to play, money matters perhaps a little less. If you're still living with your folks, or you've got another part-time job that's going to subsidize the drumming, then great, just play.
When you've done the recording side of things, so when you've done a recording,
yeah,
you'll get paid for the session, but then afterwards you get the kind of like performance.
Yeah. So most times on a session, if it's a union session, you'll get what's called union scale. So you'll get a porterage fee for taking your drums. And then you'll get, which is nominal, but if you've spoken with the producer or whoever else beforehand, they'll agree to find somewhere in the budget for you to bring your drum tech to set your drums up for you, and then you do the session on the agreed fee, which is, and you'll hear people, Americans mostly talk about triple scale. Jeff Beccaro and some of his clinics is on triple scale. So it's the union minimum times 3, which I think is 186 in this country. I don't know, it's rarely union scale. So it's about £180 for the 3-hour session, there or thereabouts. And then that changes, so you won't want to do a 3-hour gig for 180 quid. So it'll be slightly different, and it's different all the time. And you'll get paid for your time in the session, as you rightly say. So you agree that beforehand, then you get paid for your time. And there's something called PPL, Phonographic Performance Limited, PPL. So what happens is, when you play on the song, you fill in your musician's union form, and it'll have a number on, it'll have a line on for your PPL number. Now that means that when that track is played commercially in a venue or in a theatre or in a cinema, or whatever, and you played on it, you'll get royalties effectively. Now these royalties are a billionth of a penny per play, depending on the outlet it's played in. If it's played in a gym, it's probably a billionth of a penny. If it's played around the world on the Olympic opening, then it's probably significantly more. And every time it's played, that money goes into a little pot, and then 4 times a year, that money's paid out to the musicians who paid on that. So it can be a good way of making extra money. So when you play on good soundtracks, or you play on a song that's received a lot of commercial airplay in the radio, both here and abroad, you basically get checks through, or you get backs into your bank account of that money again. So if you play on a #1 song, you might get £400 for recording the drums for that one song. But then you might get thousands of pounds every 3 months, 4 times a year, for your performance on it, based on how well it does commercially on radios. You play on some stuff, and it's and you play it and you finish the session like, it's burning. This is great. This is going to be a #1, and I'm just going to buy a new car with this. This is going to be great. You never hear of it again. And then equally, you can play on some utter dross, and also walk out the session going, please don't tell anybody I was here. And it finds commercial success. Yeah. So there's no real rhyme or reason to how it happens. It just sort of happens.
Talking about success, could you just talk to us about working with Ed Sheeran? Because obviously, you know, he's quite a well-known name. I remember it must have been like a good 15 years ago. My friend showed me an early Ed Sheeran YouTube clip. No one had really heard of him. I mean, it must have been 15 years ago or something. And it was just him in his bedroom singing. And, you know, since then, it's just, you know, what a incredible talent. So it must be an amazing thing to have worked with him.
So Ed, for the most part, when he tours, does it entirely on his own, because he can do that, and he's great at it. He's so good. Me and my friends who work with Ed go and see him just to watch it, because it's incredible. It's pretty amazing. What he'll sometimes do is, when he promos a project, so when it's in its promo stage, if you've ever gone to see him live, you know, he'll have the loop pedal and he'll play Sing, for example, and he'll do the BVs and he'll loop them, and then he'll play on his guitar, or do a bit of rhythm on his guitar, loop it, and then he'll play some drums or breakbeat, or beatbox rather, and then loop it. So it takes a couple of minutes and the theatre of that process is incredible. But when you're on TV and you've got 3 minutes, 30 seconds to play the new release from your new song, from your new album on, I don't know, Graham Norton, that might not work. So you'll need a band. So for the most part, that's what we've always done with Ed. We've done TVs, live TVs. Ed won't mind. So there are live TVs, and then there are things like Spotify sessions and Deezer sessions and Capital Radio sessions and BBC Live lounges and things like that, where he'll use a band. And based on whenever we've been available, he's used. I've been lucky enough to be involved. Touch wood. He's great. But so my first gig with him was in February 2012, when his first album just came out, and we did a Radio 1 live lounge back in February 2012. So 9 years ago. 8 years ago. So he's been around, as far as I've known him, for 9 years. And he's a really good human, as a bloke. Like, the music aside, he's great, and he's smart, and he's lovely, and he's talented, really lovely and talented. And you know, because there are plenty of people you work with who are great, but you wouldn't want to necessarily hang around with. Ed's great, and his talent. There's an old saying: the harder you work, the luckier you get. And Ed has worked and worked and worked. So when people say, "Oh, he's an overnight success," or somebody is an overnight success, it's like, well, that's because you saw him overnight. You didn't see the 8 years of practicing and all the rest of it that he did. So Ed used to busk. He used to come into London on the train, and he'd come up and he'd find a jam night, and he'd do a gig, you know, as a kid at the Bedford in Balham, or wherever else he could find a place. And then he'd get back on the train, he'd go home, and he'd do that all the time, because he just wanted to be out there. He just wanted to be working. He just wanted to be honing his craft and getting better and better and better. And he's become a great mate. And so, you know, you see him play, and it's like, musically, everybody isn't into the same people. So I get some people don't like him or enjoy the music, but I really do. I think he's a great writer and a great human. So he's great.
Are you on any recordings with Ed, or is it more
some live recordings? But all of the records are usually done by producers. You'll find that a lot of or Ed will work alongside a producer with it. So you'll find that a lot of times people that do live tours don't usually record with the artist, and vice versa. There are lots of occasions that happens, and one could be diary permitting because you're on a tour and you can't get back to the studio to do a session that somebody's asked you to do, or you're on a different session so you can't do it, or that producer is like, oh, we need drums on this song. Don't worry, I always use this guy. I'm going to call it. And that's how it works. And sometimes that works in your favor and sometimes not. I'm the go-to guy for a handful of for some producers, which is great because it means when they're working and they need drums on their songs, they'll call me, which is great. And you might ring up somebody who's a good friend of yours who does their live stuff. And you might go, hey, you tour with this person. I'm just, I'm doing this thing today. And, you want to come down and, or whatever, because there's quite a fraternity in the drum world. And equally, they might be out live going, oh, I heard that you played on this album. I'm touring it now. It's because the producer won't know that person, but will know you, so we'll call you. And likewise, the music director on that tour that's just gone out, I always use this guy because he's great. And, I like touring with him. And so they'll use that guy. So there's kind of different worlds. Occasionally the worlds meet and, you become almost like a band with the artist. So you make all their albums, and it's usually with singer-songwriters. You make all their albums and then you tour with them. And it's effectively a band with a front man or a front woman. But yeah, so none of the recordings thus far, but lots of live recordings and different Spotify, Deezer sessions and live lounges and all that sort of stuff.
It's cool. You've just answered a question that I skipped about the differences between like being a studio drummer and a touring drummer. So you've kind of just covered a skipped question. Amazing.
Well, they are very different in lots of ways. I think. Like the art lies in the detail in the studio, the minutiae. Like live, you're playing to the environment. You're obviously playing to the track and the artist, but you're really playing to the environment. If there's a lot of people going, then you play in a certain way. If there are other people going, and losing their minds, then you play in a very different way again. In the studio, everything's a bit more measured, and you're really playing knowing that this is going to be heard forever. And it needs to be, the articulation in everything needs to be much more defined, much more, not perfect, but much more measured and much more accurate, at least, in terms of everything from the sound, your time, your dynamic, everything. It's a very different animal, studio recording to live performance.
What are your hobbies away from drumming?
So I have dived, like scuba dived for years and years. I've always been into it, but for a long while, but I started taking it seriously, like 5 years ago, and started doing technical diving, whereby it's not you going on holiday to Sharm el-Sheikh and going looking at the fishes. It's more diving in other environments, like cave diving and mine diving. You go on very deep, very long dives, 6.5 hour dives into caves and overhead environments and things like that is what technical diving is, and that's the sort of stuff I do, the technical diving, as well as the fun diving. And through that, I met a lot of friends, and some of those friends were involved in the RNLI, the lifeboats. And on the Thames, there are three full-time lifeboat stations. One of them's in Tower by Embankment Bridge, by Embankment Tube Station, and the other one's at Chiswick, where I live. I volunteer a couple of days a month, in between gigs or whatever else. I'm there, picking people out of the water, people jumping off bridges, boats breaking down, towing, people sinking, joggers, runners, people drowning, boats, kayakers, everything. There's lots of stuff in the water. And since this COVID stuff happened, I've been there all the time. So fairly, because the entertainment business sort of fell apart, I've been there doing my hobby, which is one of those things, fairly full time. So it's kept me sane.
Excellent. And what a good hobby that is. Brilliant.
Yeah, fun. It's good fun.
Something like that. So probably the most important question of this entire session. Might need to give this some serious thought, this one. So what's your favourite biscuit?
With or without a cup of tea?
Now, good question. What, to dunk in it or?
Yeah, because if there's a cup of tea, everything changes. The structural integrity of the biscuit, can it survive a dunk? I can eat sweeter biscuits when I've got a cup of tea to wash it down with, so that changes. Oh God, I'll think of it.
I'd say, I think the main question here is without a cup of tea, first of all. So if you just had a biscuit.
I'm going to regret this later, but because I had one earlier and it was without a cup of tea and it was great anyway, a Libanese.
Oh.
You know, you can bite the chocolate off the outside and the biscuit's still good enough that it works without the chocolate. But yeah.
But then if you get a dunk, that's not a dunker, is it? I mean,
a dunk is a milk chocolate hobnob.
Oh, which is what I had earlier. Yes.
Yeah, because the hobnob is a great dunking biscuit, but the milk chocolate topping holds it together well enough to maintain its structure and integrity. And a bit Alan Partridge. Biscuits are dangerous in like at the lifeboat station and in studios and in rehearsals. Somebody brings in biscuits, they're just there. The nature of all of it is you're fairly sedentary, so you're not moving a lot unless you're on a shout or unless you're really playing. And they're just dangerous because it's like, I want a cup of tea, yeah, I'll have a biscuit with it. It's just before you know it, you've smashed in a pack of hobnobs a day.
Oh, brilliant. So if you could give one bit of advice for up and coming drummers, what would that be?
Just play. I mean, that sounds ridiculous, but just play. Play all the time and play with everybody. Play to the radio, play music you don't like, music you do like, become versatile. When I was a kid, I just wanted to play. So my parents were amazing. And they would drive me to some weird stuff. Like if I listen back to it now, like I'd be in bands with schoolmates. We didn't really have a music department in my school. But you know, after school, I'd have clubs with my mates and I'd play music with them. I'd be in the local town band, the local brass band, the county orchestra, you know, playing stuff that I did and didn't like, but I just wanted to be out every night of the week playing. And in terms of building a career, that's sort of how it's worked for me because you play stuff, and if somebody rings you up going, oh, we're doing a Latin thing in a hotel lobby, you know, it's £150, but it's only an hour. You know, can you come do it next week? And you're like, oh, I don't really know any Latin rhythms. Well, then you've lost not only that £150, but the opportunity to play with people, the opportunity to meet a bunch of new musicians, one of who you might be on that particular gig you turned down with a bass player. And that bass player is working with, I don't know, Billie Eilish. Oh, I play bass with Billie Eilish, and you know, she's looking for a drummer, and we play well together. So why don't you come next week and audition? Because you didn't have that opportunity, because you either turned it down, or because you weren't qualified enough to play it, or you know, you're a bit above it. Then you just lost out on a mega opportunity. So just get out there and play. Learn lots of different styles. Make friends. Like, it's fun. I've got so many amazing friends through playing music, and living a great life and going around the world a bunch of times, and it's incredible all through playing the drums. But just because I've wanted to play, you know, the money is secondary. You know, it's great, you know, being able to buy a house and a car and all that's great. But you've got to do it because you want to play. Just get out there and make it happen by just doing everything that's thrown at you, even stuff that you're not really sure that you want to do. Certainly at the beginning, and then as you get older and you get a bit established, you can be a bit pickier. Well, I don't really like that music. I never have, so I'm not going to play it. But when you're starting, cut your teeth. Pay your dues. Do everything.
Mark, thank you so much for spending your time with us here at DrumWise today. It's been a pleasure talking to you. Stay safe and see you soon.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Cheers.